Good afternoon, everyone. I'm CommerceNext co-founder Veronika Sonsev. And for those that are new, CommerceNext is a community, event series, and conference for marketers at retail and direct-to-consumer brands. And on behalf of my fellow co-founders, Scott Silverman and Alan Dick, I want to welcome you to today's webinar. Our topic is Turn Facebook Uncertainty into Advertising Profitability with First-Party Data. Now, I realize that is a mouthful, but we've seen a lot of interest in this topic, not just from our webinar signups, but we've also heard the frustration of the CommerceNext community with their overall efficacy of the Facebook and Instagram ads. We keep hearing things like, I just wish that Facebook worked like it used to. And as frustrating as it may be, the good news is that today's webinar will offer some recommendations. We're very lucky to be joined by some savvy marketing and tech execs who found ways to profitably acquire customers in today's environment. But before we dig in, I want to quickly walk through a few thank yous and announcements. So first, I want to thank Black Crow AI. They have been leading the charge when it comes to machine learning solutions to help optimize Facebook advertising. They have been a great thought partner for this webinar. I also want to thank our speakers, Aubrey Ritchie, VP of Media Intelligence at TechStyle Fashion Group, Seiya Vogt, VP of Marketing at Keeps, Katie Miller-Reed, VP of Performance Marketing at Society6 and Saatchi Art, and Richard Harris, CEO and founder of Black Crow AI. This week's speakers have been pushing the envelope when it comes to Facebook advertising. We are very lucky to have them with us today. We will be sending all of our speakers thank you gifts via our gifting partner Gift Now as a small token of our appreciation. And we'll also be sending 5 lucky audience members gifts as well. Those members are randomly selected from the audience that is tuning in live. Sorry for anyone who's watching the replay. Now, I want to make sure everyone was aware of our upcoming CommerceNext Summit. It's taking place June 21st and 22nd at the New York Hilton Midtown. We've been announcing speakers for the show. They include Charlie Cole, CEO of FTD, Ekta Chopra, Chief Digital Officer of Elf Beauty, Brian Seawald, SVP of E-commerce at Express, and many, many more. The summit covers a ton of topics going from setting up shop in the metaverse to scaling TikTok influencers to winning the war for talent, in addition to our usual marketing and e-commerce topics. We would love to have you join us. We've added the registration link to the chat, but you can also go to commercenext.com to learn more. For those of you that are going to Shop Talk, we are hosting a CommerceNext reception at Topgolf on March 27th. That's the first night, Sunday, of Shop Talk. In addition to being a fabulous opportunity to reconnect with the CommerceNext community, you'll also have a chance to practice your golf swing, play bar games, or just relax with a nice cocktail, which is what I will be doing. This event is for retailers and brands only. If you're interested in joining, please reach out to Alan at commercenext.com. Then our next webinar is on spinning up a personalization flywheel. It's actually in a month on April 6th at 2 p.m. Eastern, 11 a.m. Pacific time. It features Uncommon Goods, Capsule, and Bloomreach. We have also added a link in the chat for you to register, but you can always go to commercenext.com to find out what's going on. And then our last podcast episode features Lazord Chief Digital Officer, Rizwan Rajput. Lazord is a jewelry powerhouse in the Middle East. In this podcast, Rizwan shares his strategy for standing up digital from the ground up. They have a ton of stores, but they're just getting digital going. It's a really interesting story, and you can find out more at commercenext.com or wherever you get your podcasts. Chat, Q&A, polls, and handouts. Now, chat think of that as the lounge. It's where you can give the speakers high fives, interact with other audience members. We really love it when our community engages. But if you have questions, we want you to use that QA tab. So that's that second tab on the top. You click on that link, put your question in the bottom. And then the reason why we want you to use the QA tab is you have this additional functionality of being able to upvote the questions. And that helps me know which questions are most important to you so we can ask them during the panel portion of this webinar. If you're interested in the handouts, they're on the last tab, the one furthest on the right. You'll be able to download the slides from today, as well as the white paper from Black Crow AI. And again, for anyone who's watching this on replay, those handouts are at the bottom of your player. So today's agenda, we're going to start with a presentation, 5 tips on using first-party data to drive D2C profit by Richard Harris, who's the CEO of Black Crow AI. Then we'll have audience polls and then a panel discussion with TechStyle, Keeps, and Society 6. So it's now with great pleasure that I introduce Richard Harris, CEO of Black Crow AI. He is going to share 5 tips for using first-party data to drive D2C profit. Richard, welcome.
Thank you, Veronika. Great to see you and wonderful to be here.
We're thrilled you could be here.
Great. Shall we dive in? So first of all, yes, it's great to be with everyone here today. And as Veronika mentioned, I think everyone has got the message that it's been an extraordinarily turbulent time in growth marketing, particularly for brands that had a growth playbook that was heavily and possibly is still heavily reliant on Facebook. And that playbook has had a grenade lobbed into it as the tech giants battle it out. And we're seeing costs rising at the same time that performance is declining and attribution has become a cluster. So today I'm going to talk about first-party data and how fully leveraging it can help reduce the chaos and get growth back on track. The big messages that I'll be talking to you about today are that you have to get your first-party data house in order. Business as usual, I think everyone gets, is just not an option right now. And first-party data is so important because it's an asset that you own. Brands have more of it than they think. And there's so much data available, in fact, first-party data, that you need machines to make sense of it. And machine learning is becoming much more accessible and highly affordable, even in the middle and lower ends of the market. And I'll talk through how. And at Black Crow, just so you know, we do exactly that. We help brands make the most of their first-party data using machine learning. And once they do it, they can improve ROAS meaningfully, think 25 to 50%. And today I'll be talking through exactly how you can do that and telling you a little bit more about how first-party data in combination with machine intelligence can really change the game. All right. So before we dive in, I just want to talk about why first-party data. I think many of us have heard that message. First-party data is critical, but I think many brands are just at the beginning of the journey of really leveraging it and understanding it. And I'll talk about in particular why it's such an important part of dealing with the very turbulent customer acquisition landscape. So as we think about first-party data, there's some really important reasons of why it should be core, not just to your marketing strategy, but to your business strategy. And the first one is very obvious, as Veronika spoke about. Brands don't have a lot of choices these days, but to get their first-party data house in order. Meaning third-party data is dead. I think we've all heard about the death of the cookie. And really the whole ecosystem of buying and selling third-party data is dying and will be dead in a number of years. And even first-party data is getting much harder to use with all of the changes going on in iOS, which we're also familiar with. It's even your own asset, your own first-party data is getting harder and harder to activate. And because of that, you really need to make the most of it. I think everyone knows the opt-out rates in iOS are very high, meaning it's getting harder and harder to understand your users' behaviors outside of your own owned properties. And Google is moving in this direction as well. And both of them partly guided by the consumer demand for privacy, but also the big platforms are putting walls up around data so that it can be exclusively owned by them. So that's one notion that really you don't have much choice, but even putting landscape changes aside, there's some really important aspects of first-party data. The first is that it's an asset you own and that you have more of it than you think. So there's so much intelligence that can be generated about your customers and about your business from your own first-party data, so that you need to own it. It can't be locked inside of a single platform or application. It really is, your data is an asset that you need to leverage and deploy in all the ways that you see fit. And the point about having more of it than you think is also very important. I think many brands think of first-party data as their CRM data, meaning the database they have about users who have purchased something with them before, or perhaps have signed up for an email newsletter or something like that. And they'll try to do as much analytics as they can on that data set. But if you think about it, if your conversion rate is say 3% and your subscription rate is 2%, that means that your CRM database has data and permits you to do analytics on about 5% of your total user base, of all the people who show up to your brand's website. But actually, there's a lot more. There's all of the streaming data, the behavioral data, and the contextual data about your users even before they purchase. And so you actually have data about the other 95% of your user base. And there's so much of it streaming in real time that can provide real cues and keys and windows into customer behavior and the value of your customers in the future. There's so much of it, in fact, that to really take advantage of it, you need to use machines. Third, I want to touch on the fact that first-party data really can transform ROAS. I'll walk through the specifics, but when you're leveraging 100% of your first-party data on 100% of your site visitors, that really can transform ROAS, not just in Facebook, but really in any channel. And there's some examples from Bearby, which is a brand noted. It's a very quickly growing brand. It makes weighted blankets. And they started deploying machine learning to really understand all of the first-party data, about 100% of their visitors. And just deploying that strategy meant they were able to double the number of conversions that were coming from its lower funnel marketing activities. And they were also able to more than double their ROAS. And so these are really incredible results. Lastly, just backdrop on why we care about first-party data is attribution is broken. And you can actually use your own first-party data, especially in combination with machine learning, to make better sense of how your marketing is actually performing. By using machine learning with first-party data, you can understand which channels, which campaigns, and even down to the ad level, which of those are bringing in the best users, those that are going to have the highest future value for your brand. Now, I'm going to take just a second to get very nerdy with you here, because I've been talking about machine learning and first-party data, but what do I actually mean? And so I'm going to show you this visual, which is something we at Black Crow have done for hundreds and hundreds of brands. But it's really about using all first-party data, including the streaming real-time data of users shopping on your branded environment, to understand what the future value of every visitor is, and then being able to deploy that really anywhere you want. So think about this as a map of the core of your business, meaning it's your site visitors, and here we're thinking of them in deciles, and then the value of your visitors up along the y-axis expressed as the conversion rate of each of those deciles. And what we see here along the bottom, each of those deciles, and we always start by asking a brand, what's your conversion rate? And in 99% of cases, there'll be a single answer. My conversion rate is 3% or 2% or 9%. I'm showing here 6%. And what that really means is that that's thinking about all of your users on average, as though each of these deciles along the bottom is composed of random visitors, each of whom will buy something 6% of the time. But when you're really leveraging your first-party data, you can actually see into the future. And you can now take a look at all of these visitors, these decile cohorts, ranked in terms of their future value. And you get a very, very different picture. You realize that your flat line 6% conversion rate is actually a curve, and it's a knowable curve. You can know it in advance, seconds, months, weeks in advance. And what it's telling you is that there are some deciles of your user base on the far right that have 50 times the conversion rate of others. So they may convert at 40 or 50%, whereas the deciles on the far left may convert at something close to 0%. We do this all day long. It works 100% of the time, but you really can know the future value of every single site visitor. And when you know that, and then think about, hey, is there anything different I would want to do for users on the far right versus users on the far left? The answer is, of course, I kind of want to do everything differently, but particularly marketing. And so I'll ask you to just keep this curve in mind, meaning it is now knowable who is who in advance, which users are going to convert at 50%, which at 0%. And now if we think about our paid marketing activities through the prism of this curve rather than the flat line, you can see that everything will change. So let me just go through some very practical tips on how to deploy this kind of intelligence, this kind of first-party data intelligence, and especially predictions to change the game in your ROAS. So the first thing that brands can do is really scale their prospecting with predictive audiences. And here what I mean is most of the customers that we talk to, most of the brands, retailers, DTC brands, they're running out of ROI in platforms like Facebook before they run out of budget. I mean, if they could achieve their efficiency threshold, their CPA, they would gladly spend a lot more. But usually they're spending up to what seems to be a glass ceiling, above which any incremental spend is diluting their efficiency metrics, diluting their ROAS. But now that you know, if you just think back to that graph, now that you know that there are some users with very high future value, you can unlock new predictive audiences and start to scale up your prospecting by as much as 50 to 100% by creating lookalike audiences just based on your high future value visitors, even though they may not have converted yet. Second, you can really add a lot of efficiency to your lower funnel marketing, remarketing, retargeting. And in particular, again, thinking about that graph, if you had to focus your remarketing dollars on certain cohorts of your users, you would again want to focus on the far right, on the users that have a high future value to you, a high propensity to convert in the future. Now that you know this, you can deploy all of your spend against those high future value audiences if you see those high value users again in Facebook or Instagram. And just to give you a quick example, by deploying this kind of strategy, meaning building a machine learning model based entirely on first-party data, a customer of ours, Shorty Love, was able to reduce its CPA by a third, boost its net profit by more than 50%, as well as reduce its CPA in prospecting by almost 20%. So these are very meaningful to the P&Ls of the companies that we work with. Also, what's very important is that first-party data can give you a really huge head start as you diversify. Certainly, it works incredibly well in Facebook, but we talked to many, many brands who have said, you know what, I can't rely on Facebook being the only platform I use to acquire new customers. And so they're looking to expand beyond Facebook into TikTok, Pinterest, Snapchat, of course, Google. And using your first-party data, and especially predictions created by machines using your first-party data, you can quickly identify which channels are sending you the highest quality traffic. And you can then focus on developing that channel and cut your learning curve by months and focusing on those places where there is real ROI and the messages resonate for your brand. Let me just walk you through what that actually looks like. And again, if you think back to that curve of the way we're able to differentiate high future value users versus low future value, those people who are very likely to convert in the future versus those that aren't, this is a report that we provide to all of the brands that work with us. And what you're looking at here is the light purple bar is the volume of traffic that came from a particular channel over the last week. So you can see in Facebook, something like 27,000 users came from that channel over the last week. And then the darker purple bar right beside it is what percentage of those users were high value users, meaning in those top 2 or 3 deciles. So which visitors coming from that channel are very likely to buy in the future. And this is an insight that is incredibly valuable as you're making decisions about how to diversify away from just one platform like Facebook intelligently. And you can see that in this case, the promising user rate or the high value user rate for Facebook is just under 10%. Whereas in Snapchat right beside it, even though there's a lot less traffic, a lot lower volume today coming from Snapchat, over 30% of the users that do come from Snapchat are in that high future value category, meaning they're very likely to buy in the future. Very similar story in Pinterest, extremely low volume, but the volume that is coming is very high future value. And many of the folks that we work with use this report on a weekly basis to say, okay, I need to scale up my new customer acquisition Where should I do it? Where should I run more experiments? Where should I ramp my spend? And having this sort of first party prediction intelligence sitting in front of you can really help you understand where to focus your customer acquisition investment. Just a couple other quick points, and then we'll move over to the panel. But if you think about that curve of being able to know high future value users in advance, you can deploy that intelligence really anywhere in your business, not only in your paid marketing. So once you know who's likely to buy, who's likely to subscribe in the future, you can differentiate your CRM activities by predictive audience. You can personalize things like promotional offers and incentives based on which segment your users are in. You can customize your merchandising. You can prioritize your support tickets. So really all these different touch points that you have with your users, whether they bought or not, you can tailor those based on how likely they are to be high value to you in the future. Just a quick note, in addition to first party data, there's also something called zero party data, which you may be familiar with, but it's essentially the data that users sort of voluntarily and proactively give you. And it can really help you understand your user base. It's often in the form of quizzes or surveys that appear on site. And there's a bunch of vendors out there who can get this up and running for you immediately. There's a company called Inquire Labs that does an amazing job of this. But don't neglect zero party data, because that is really the proactive data that your customers want you to understand about them. And deploying those, especially in DTC environments, can be extremely helpful. So just to wrap up, I want to hit on some of the key takeaways and messages and urge you to really take advantage of your first party data. It's your key asset, and make sure you can activate it. Because there's so much of it and you have more than you think, you have all of that streaming data of your users' behavior inside of your branded property. Use machines to make the most sense of it, because it really is too much for any individual human to handle. And then lastly, as you diversify your social channels, you certainly want to get better in Facebook and deploy your first party data there. But as you think about diversifying, make sure you do so intelligently. And there are many tools out there that can help you do that. If you'd like to see your own brand's version of that curve, if you'd like us to build you a predictive model, just get in touch. There's an email address there from someone who can help you out. But we do this free. It's literally one click on your part. There's no data science or data engineering expertise or knowledge required on your part. It's very simple to do, and we're happy to build them all day long. Thank you so much for your time. I hope these tips have been helpful to you. And let's go over to the panel.
Awesome. Richard, thank you so much. And actually, before we go into the panel, we're going to do some quick polls, and then we'll get everyone on. So these polls, for those who are new, remember the polls are, they'll pop up on your screen, but then if you want to see where they track, you can go to polls closed and you'll be able to see the results live. So our first question, we are very curious to know what % of your advertising budget is currently invested in Facebook and Instagram. And our options, I kind of broke these out to 81% plus, 61 to 80%, 41 to 60%, 21 to 40%, 1 to 20%, or I guess for those who don't advertise on Facebook, you can select we don't advertise on Facebook. I'm assuming that's a minority of folks since you're calling into this webinar. Check out the results here. It looks like Facebook is a pretty substantial portion of most people's advertising budget. About the most common is it's 21 to 40%, which is actually lower than I thought, followed by 1 to 20%. And then it kind of trails off from there. Interesting. And I'm wondering if that, what we probably should have asked is whether it increased or decreased since all of the changes, but for another time. Great, we're gonna close this one out. Our next question is, what have you done in response to the worsening performance of Facebook and Instagram? Actually, we cover it here. Leverage first-party data for better targeting, reduce your Facebook spend, tried other strategies like influencers, move dollars to other platforms, changed your measurement approach, or if there's something else that we didn't capture here, please note that in the chat. We're very curious. Again, we're looking to find out what you've done in response to the worsening performance of Facebook and Instagram advertising. And the options are leverage first-party data, reduce Facebook spend, tried other strategies like influencers, move dollars to other platforms, changed measurement approach, or other. It looks like the majority of you, about 37%, have moved dollars to other platforms, which is interesting. About 18% have reduced Facebook spend, which I guess would be aligned with that. People are trying influencers as well. And then a small percent, 11%, have changed their measurement approach. And I'm looking in the chat to see what other people have done. There's a question about whether we'll be sending the responses. We normally don't, but we can if that's of interest to folks. These are interesting poll questions. Awesome. So the third poll question is, how far are you in using first-party data to acquire? How far along are you in using first-party data to acquire new customers? And we have 4 options there. We currently use first-party data for customer acquisition. We're working on building our data models. We're working on getting our data into one place. I know that's a challenge for some. And then the last is we don't have any plans to use first-party data. And this is amazing. A majority of you, 58%, are already using first-party data, which is fantastic. And then it's about 20% of people who are working on building their models, and about 20% of people who are getting their data in one place. Fantastic. Then the final question is just tied to the webinar next week, which is all about personalization, not next week, on April 6th, which is all about personalization. So we have a poll related to that topic. And Scott Silverman is moderating that one, and he wants to know, how would you rate your current personalization capabilities? And the options are best in class, which means you are fully leveraging the latest technology. That's A. B is strong. We have significant lift from personalization, but we know that there's more upside. C is we're getting there. We're beginning to see ROI, but we're in the early stages. And D is minimal. It's not a priority for us. So let's see where we are here in terms of how you would rate your current personalization capabilities. And no one has rated themselves best in class, but it sounds like the majority are getting there. So I always tell people personalization is a journey, not a switch. So definitely it's going to take a bit to, we're always evolving and getting better and better. This is great. Awesome. So I think with that, let's turn it over to the panel discussion. Move it here, bring everyone on. Hello, how are you guys?
Hello, it's great to be here.
Awesome to be here. Thanks for having us.
Well, we are thrilled there's a lot of interest in questions. There's a lot of people who've been on the line kind of trying to figure out how they can get their Facebook working the way it used to. But before we jump in, everyone's had a chance to meet Richard, but I want Aubrey, Katie, and Seiya, I want you guys to introduce yourselves and just talk briefly about your Facebook and Instagram advertising program so people have some context. So Aubrey, I'll start with you and then go to Katie and Seiya if that works.
Yeah, sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Aubrey Ritchie. I'm the VP of Media Intelligence and Media Measurement at TechStyle Fashion Group. I previously oversaw all of our paid media programs for customer acquisition across our brand portfolio. Most recognizable is Fabletics and Rihanna's Savage X Fenty. And we've been large-scale advertisers on Facebook since back in 2012. The answer to that poll question, is certainly between 50 and 80%, depending on what our brands. While it's been a challenging year, we're still finding, tons of opportunity, not seeing diminishing returns in what's going on, or in what Facebook is able to deliver for us. But it remains a huge part of our media mix, and what we're leaning on truly for growth. And there's just not really anything else out there that is as scalable and effective at delivering bottom funnel results.
Awesome. Katie.
Hi, everyone. Katie Reed. I'm VP of Performance Marketing at Society6 and Saatchi Art, which are 2 e-commerce marketplace brands that are part of Leaf Group. So how we activate across Facebook, Instagram really spans the full marketing funnel. So, we want to drive brand awareness, we want to drive brand engagement, traffic, conversion, cross-sell, right? So for Society6, we're lucky that we have over 2 million organic followers across all of our social platforms. So we're actively producing a lot of content to engage that specific audience, but also amplifying that content to expand our reach and increase our overall awareness. We certainly have a lot of traffic and conversion-oriented campaigns live, right? Targeting new prospects, where it's all imperative for us to continue to grow our new customer base. And then, we have a strong presence in terms of retargeting both site visitors and existing customers. Society6 gets several million unique visits each and every month. So, driving repeat traffic back to our site is a massive opportunity. And obviously, like cross-sell to existing customers. So that's kind of our approach from an audience perspective. I would just say, what is so critical, and I think we all know this, is in addition to audience targeting is creative. So that's, really top of mind for us. And, really part of our roadmap is rapid creative development, building out that hypothesis-driven test and learn roadmap to understand, for our specific audiences, what are the messages, what are the design approaches, what are the ad formats that are really resonating and driving performance.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're going to definitely spend some time talking about creative, because I think that's one of the areas where first-party data really gives you a leg up. Seiya.
Thanks, Veronika. Yeah. So hi, everyone. My name is Seiya Vogt. I'm the VP of Marketing for a brand called Keeps, which is underneath 30 Madison. And so 30 Madison overall is a healthcare company dedicated to helping people with chronic conditions. And that's everything from higher acuity, more complex medical conditions like we have a brand called Cove for migraines, as well as what we call sort of lower acuity conditions, less medically complex, but still equally in some ways, emotionally complex conditions such as hair loss. And so I work on Keeps, which is the first and only partner that you'll ever need to take control of your hair loss. And overall, we provide treatment options for men, experiencing hair loss, no matter where they are in their journey. And actually, we just opened up an in-person hair restoration studio in New York City, which was a very exciting milestone for us, last month. And so we're seeing like great results from, the guys going in there to think about their hair restoration. So, I think that, so Facebook is obviously a huge part of our overall, strategy, right? We're at the end of the day, we are a D2C, service, and even though we, sort of provide some medical care and like actual RX and treatments to the guys. There's a huge piece here, both in terms of the actual work that you need to do on Facebook from a data-driven point of view to drive like bottom funnel type of conversions with people who actually actively know what they're looking for and what they want. But there's also like an equal importance and something that I'm sure we're going to get into later on the brand portion, because there's a huge knowledge gap of hair loss and the treatments that exist. There's a lot of snake oil that's out there. We provide obviously FDA approved treatments, and so we are using Facebook not just for that data-driven type of approach that we'll get into today to acquire customers very efficiently, but also thinking about it from a brand awareness standpoint. How are we actually going to be driving awareness of the treatment plans themselves, like us as a brand, and how we can make our mark in this crowded market space. And so there's a lot of great stuff I'm sure we're going to get into today, and looking forward to the conversation.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of cool about this particular group, because say in your case, you're looking at a product that has an education kind of on ramp. Aubrie has a subscription product that, and with Society6, Katie's like really looking at people buy on occasion, and then maybe they don't purchase for a long time, and then they come back. So everyone kind of has different challenges, which also probably merit different strategies when it comes to Facebook advertising. So it's kind of good to have that in context. So my first question, kind of digging right in, I think Richard made a great case in his presentation that first party data is really the key to improving how you acquire customers on Facebook. let's start with like, what have you done to bolster your first party data to better leverage it for acquisition purposes? And Katie, I'm going to lead with you on this question.
Sure. Yeah. So for both the brands I work on, Society6 and Saatchi Art, there's so much that we're doing to collect first party data. I think, for most brands, what is foundational is offering an incentive to customers or visitors on your site for that email address, for that phone number, or even referring their friends, right? I would say, Society6 is very much a unique brand because it's really a community that's fostering relationships between artists and consumers. So we have over 450,000 emerging artists from all over the world that consumers love. So one of our big pushes is getting people to become a member, right? Create an account on the site. And with that, you get to follow those artists that you love. You get to like the designs that you love. You get to create your own personal collections and wish list, very similar to, Pinterest functionality, so to speak. I would say beyond that, we work very closely with a number of technology partners to really leverage and maximize the first party data that we are collecting, right? It's one thing to collect the data, but, are you really understanding it? And are you really leveraging it and maximizing it to its fullest capabilities? So, one of those partners is Black Crow. We've been a very happy client. So, we're using a Black Crow scoring model largely for our site visitors through Facebook, Instagram. As mentioned, we drive millions of unique visits each and every month. So, if we just retargeted every single one of those visitors, that wouldn't be an efficient approach for us. So, we see a real difference in those sort of top deciles versus middle versus bottom. And that's really helped drive our efficiency. I would say also what's unique to Society6 is we have literally billions of SKUs. So personalization is absolutely paramount. And we have a pretty wide tech stack. We're working with Bluecore, we're working with Wonderkin, we're working with Attentive on ensuring that we're serving the right product recommendation to an individual based on their journey on our site. So that's kind of core to us. And then I'd say the last partner that's really been great for our tech stack, it's a recent addition. They're called Decile. They're a sister company to us. They're a customer data and analytics platform where we can easily see, get to know our customers at a number of different sort of cuts and views, including at the marketing channel level. So we know that, the customer that comes to us through Facebook is a lot different than the customer that comes to us through direct mail, for example, right? So we want to leverage that, like what products are they purchasing? That's going to inform our creative strategy, but also, how much are we willing to spend for that customer coming from that platform based on AOV, based on margins, and based on LTV data.
Awesome. So it seems like there's a lot of technology that you're using to try to enhance the profiles. Seiya or Aubrey, anything you want to add there?
I would just say, and Richard spoke to this earlier, the output is only as good as your input. So lucky for us, our data and analytics leadership team, had the foresight to sort of recognize the privacy first landscape wasn't just going to require better data governance, when we were just talking about GDPR and CCPA compliance, but that there was going to be significant opportunity to synthesize that and activate it across, all of our paid media channels to optimize, our customer acquisition efforts and not just, again, sort of CRM or site specific. So we've just started to kick off the strategic segmentation there, a lot of the things that Katie kind of just spoke to. But we've also either completed or soon will complete, every relevant S2S server-to-server integration out there. We obviously started with Facebook Cappy. You're living under a rock if you haven't heard about, bolstering your data.
For those who may have not used Cappy, tell them what it is, just so we can get everyone on the same page.
It's just their server-to-server integration, their conversions API. So it's just essentially kind of backfilling, all of the data. We're passing all of the data back and making sure, it's sort of tracking with or enhancing the data that we used to get from pixels that we no longer have all of the visibility into, and Facebook can't. And then of course we're also working on those integrations on the Google side. Snapchat, TikTok is becoming really important. So we're going to be one of the first to implement server to server there. Our streaming partners like Roku. And then, we're also partnering really closely with Facebook in several of their very early alpha and beta pilot programs, that the signals and measurement teams are running as they're developing and testing their, privacy enhancing tech stack. So it's really, we're just trying to stay focused on, really keeping, the media signal, as bolstered as possible.
Awesome.
Yeah, echoing that statement, especially when it comes to personalization, and I know, which is a good that you're talking about that in a few weeks, is something that we think about, quite a bit. Because for hair loss, like you could come to us with, really anywhere within your journey, right? It could be your very first time. It could be, you could have tried a lot of different types of treatments, and so there's a big a piece here of understanding exactly where that consumer is within their buying journey, and making sure that you're also providing the right opportunities for them within your site, within types of education you may provide to them, the products that you surface up. To Katie's point, I have 6 SKUs. I don't have over 1 million or whatever that you have, Katie, but still there's that level of insight that I think you need to know about your customer, that then you can start leveraging within these channels, and that will be really important, the types of creative in particular that you surface up to the customers. And so that is a really big piece that we're thinking of. So obviously Aubrey brought up a lot of these great elements on the data side, but I think the creative piece is also equally important in some ways, especially as Facebook algorithm is getting worse and worse. Creative starts to get much more important.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's a lot of testing. I guess once you get the data in, Richard, I want to kind of go to you, because a lot of what Black Crow does is helps people understand that first party data and use it for better targeting. Talk about, what are some of the things that you look for in your customer data and how they're feeding it back into the system?
Sure. So, I talked about this a little bit, where most people think of their customer data as their CRM database. And obviously that is an extremely rich source. But the sort of other 95% that I was talking about, which is literally how users, get to your brand and what all of their sort of behavior is, what are they looking at, for how long, how deeply are they scrolling, how quickly are they moving through, are they sort of getting more refined in their searching? These are all extremely rich signals from which you can extract a lot of intelligence about your user base. And it's not the kind of thing that sort of human intelligence can make sense of, but it is the kind of thing, and it's often dark matter for many brands where, yes, they're doing analytics, CRM analytics, but no, they're not doing real-time analytics. And so that's one of the things where we try to, for brands, crack open that dark matter, this other 95% of data that they have, and make sense of it. But I think, deploying that sort of predictive intelligence can be helpful in so many ways. Katie and Seiya were talking about creative, right? And now you can even look down to the level, that report I was showing about channels versus high value users. You can go down to the ad creative level and say, wow, which creatives in which channels were bringing me users that are very likely to buy in the future. And that sort of look forward on the way I'm spending my marketing dollars and the performance I expect them to have in the future, that can be super, super helpful for brands.
Awesome.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Veronika.
No.
I was just gonna build on that for a little bit, and totally agree with what you're talking about, Richard. And so this is something that's really been vital to us as we think about the types of customers that come to us, what they need, what type of treatment plans that we want to set up for them, because ultimately we want to create something that is there's not so many different permutations of a treatment plan for our guys, but there's still a lot of different elements in who they are, what they're looking for, and also that product mix that we can get to them. We're a subscription service, and so understanding a lot of those types of elements is really important. So we worked very closely with our data science team too. And if you have one, amazing. If you don't, there are tools like Black Crow out there, or other sort of services that may help you analyze the data that you do have. But we basically took that data, layered on some third-party demographic data as well, to understand how different demographics are acting within our site, and what behavioral elements, including like churn or like AOVs and product mix, lifetime value, all of those elements to help us narrow down exactly who, from a data standpoint, our customer segments are, and then and then you can use those, segments, through tools. There's actually a tool called Segment as well as segmentation, which sometimes gets confusing internally. But you can use tools like Segment or other sort of data tools to pipe that information into platforms like Facebook or really whichever. And we're doing this on the CRM side as well to get better access and knowledge to the customers sooner rather than later, and sort of treating them in ways that we think are vital at that first sort of initial period of initial interaction with our brand. And so if you can think about all of those elements that are important for you and then apply those within the platforms, like that's one way in which we're trying to approach it today.
I want to add on one thing to that, if you don't mind, Veronika, just it kind of ties both Richard and Seiya's points together. One of the really cool things, that we're finding is, while we're sort of specifically focused on media optimization and performance of our media and ads on Facebook, one of the things that we've uncovered is, this concept of click-through color. We because we're tagging all of these dimensions and elements within our ads, and started tagging SKUs, one thing that we found is that it's the colors, the bright colors and patterns of leggings that are actually driving people to the site, but on their first purchase they're actually taking more of the neutral and safe colors like black and taupes and things like that. And so not only did that help us improve did that give us insight for our ads, it also helped inform our site merch team on how to display and show products for the individual user and do personalization that way. But one step further, it really helped us change and evolve our merchandising strategy and how we buy, so that we don't buy too deep into these colors because we know they're driving, and some people actually do want to buy those colors or patterns. But really, we actually need to stock up more on the neutral colors because that's what the majority of people are taking.
That's really
I have one add-on actually too.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, sorry, I know we're all compiling. So, Seiya, you made me think. So, I think another opportunity to leverage Facebook is through trying to interact with consumers on the site. And this ties back to Richard, your slide on zero-party data, right? So just asking consumers, right? You can upload files and have the platform create lookalikes based on, what a man may be looking for, but you can also just ask them directly. People love that kind of stuff. Like for Saatchi art, we have a quiz on Facebook now. It's an art quiz to help people find their own personal art style, right? We ask a series of questions, and then you give us your email address, and we tell you what your personal style is. Mine is eclectic for some reason. And then you get specific product recommendations designed specifically for you. So there's a big value exchange there. I've done similar type of experiences through other brands that I've worked on. And what I found is not only do you add to your CRM file, but people who engage with those experiences convert at a really high rate.
Yep. I love, you guys have make my job as a moderator super easy because we've already touched on creative and personalizing the landing experience and using quizzes. I want to pull some of the audience questions in because people come in to be able to tap the experts like you guys. And Sarah McMahon asked, is anyone seeing radically different channel mixes driving improved performance after iOS 14? And if so, which new channels are becoming key drivers? And are you using first-party data to validate, such as monitoring growth or new audience segments in your CDP? Does anyone want to answer Sarah's question? It's a couple questions here. They're asking which new channels, and then then she's asking how do you validate the data you're seeing?
I'll just give a super quick overview because we see across dozens and dozens of brands, retail, DTC, and we have seen a big focus on diversification. I'd say the first go-tos were sort of Pinterest and Snapchat, but TikTok has really, even over the last quarter, really sort of elevated in prominence. And all of those channels enable you to bring first-party data with you as well. So I think that's really good. I think they're earlier in the journey in creating tools and processes versus say where Facebook and Instagram are, but they're getting there very, very fast.
Yeah, I mean, I think we did. We definitely pivoted initially, and I mean, we've been talking about diversification away from Facebook for years, but really, in the development and sort of evolution of our media measurement models and methodologies, what we pivoted very hard to TikTok, for example, and in last click models, that actually was looking very good. A lot of how did you hear answers attributed to TikTok. But once we really developed and honed our MMM model, we actually have found significant diminishing returns on TikTok. So we're, sort of able to kind of pivot and understand, the saturation point there where, it made sense. But one of the coolest things from, that was sort of revealed to us through top down and an advantage we have of sort of having multiple brands, we can sort of cross compare and validate if the models are showing the same thing. And they were. But we got really granular with our Facebook tactics, and we were able to identify that certain tactics in that model had a greater point of diminishing returns, and so it's really enabled us to optimize our Facebook tactics, video versus dynamic and DABA, versus just our standard prospecting and upper funnel efforts, and really understand how each one of those tactics just within Facebook is delivering and performing. So it's really helped us maximize Facebook, which is still the best performing channel we have that is also scalable. And the other social platforms or things that people are excited about, really just the efficiency and the scale is not there from what we're finding.
Awesome.
That makes, I love that answer. And we're, exploring a lot of the, similar type of structure to what you're talking about, Aubrey, but that's awesome to hear. The only thing I'd add in terms of diversification, I know this is a Facebook conversation, but I will say, think about, where, how can you meet the customers where they are, right? And so we're starting to see a lot of dividends being paid off, particularly in the influencer space, on YouTube and shows like that, right? And so if you can figure out, and this is something that can also help power other channels. And so if you have, if you know that certain, topics are really interesting to your audience, that's something that you can index into, your Facebook strategy as well. And so, as an example, gaming in particular is a really big space for our audience. And so, even though it has nothing to do with hair loss, we still advertise there, and we think about how can we tap into the right influencers in that market, and then transfer that over and whitelisting and doing things like that within Facebook, so we can at least amplify that that knowledge and just the awareness of the Keeps brand overall. And so while it's not necessarily a pure direct response channel, to Aubrey's point on thinking about how you heard about surveys or MMMs, right? You can see that having an impact in those sources as well. So that's just one piece that I would say is think about where exactly your customers are, where they're having those conversations, and then try to tap into that as well organically as a brand.
Yeah, I
love
just
that.
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
Facebook, in my view, it's still a great platform for driving brand awareness, and it's a great platform for retargeting site visitors, especially if you can use a Black Pro, right? It's sort of that middle segment prospecting where I think brands can still get it to work, but you might not be able to spend as much money because it isn't quite as efficient. So, echoing Aubrey, we're looking at expansion within social media platforms, Pinterest, TikTok, for example. YouTube, I've seen in my career, has actually been a great conversion driver, believe it or not. And then thinking through, what are other sort of paid channels. Paid email is actually something newer that I've tested into really successfully, where you can grow new customer acquisition.
Awesome. I want to shift gears because time flies. And one of the things I want to make sure we touch on is attribution, because that is a big thing that broke with iOS 14.5. The Facebook measurement is definitely not the same as it used to be. And I'd love to hear kind of what you're doing for attribution right now. Aubrey, I'd love to start with you on this one.
Yeah, I think a lot of people, I think what's really important to remember is, it really isn't the attribution or the contribution of Facebook in particular that has changed. It's just the attribution. So I think a lot of people panicked, when all of a sudden the CPAs in there started looking, insane, which is why they either, started moving money out of there, or just spending less in general. But what we found, is that it is just as effective as it was before through our MMM models and through geo-testing validation and Facebook's new, sort of private lift products, which does actually, in a privacy safe way, give us the full and complete view that we had pre-iOS. And nothing has changed. So what we have really, worked to do is, continue to validate. We've definitely upped the frequency and the cadence, of those testings, really leaning into our MMM model, which I'll come back to in a second, because we've done something unique there. But what we have found through a lot of these tests is that, with all of the data aggregation that's still happening, really at the ad set level, it's not letting you go as granular and giving you those insights that you need, to really deeply optimize your campaigns, which is also driving up costs in addition to just rising CPMs. So, but what we've seen is that Facebook is really misattributing conversions across different tactics, across different parts of the funnel, which is leading to people, to buyers optimizing to the wrong things. So geo-testing has been core and critical, to identifying this and proving it time and time again. So, really not stop relying so much on what you're seeing in Facebook and, leverage these other testing methodologies, to really kind of prove this out, because you're probably making the wrong decisions by looking at Facebook data. You need more, you need cross-validation and triangulation. And what I was mentioning about the top-down model, one thing we've done is it is really hard to translate something like that is very high level, zoomed out, traditionally kind of just used more for planning and general media mix. But we've actually been able to back it into our financial targets and translate it in a way where it shoots out UI specific targets for each of the channels, so that the buyers have targets that are rooted in our top-down outputs, but in their language that they are working in every day.
Awesome. And I know you guys have spent a lot of effort on that. It's a pretty sophisticated model. Anything you guys want to add to that?
No, I think that was a really great answer. And trying to think about like how you can get, especially if you start to break that down from a channel by channel level, like how you can get that into the hands of your team is really, really important. And so definitely echoing, things like MMM approach or and understanding like lift analysis studies. Like even if you think about on the Facebook side, we did a like a split cell test and added in, brand spend as an example on one cell versus, not doing it in other, and just understanding what that lift was. So you could see the results, internally in your system. And to Aubrey's point, like really not relying on Facebook like CPA data, because if we relied on that, like we are definitely optimizing towards the wrong thing, I think is really, really important. So figuring out like what that right internal metric is for you. And then getting that into the hands of all your channel managers is exactly the way like I think about it as well.
Yeah,
go ahead, Kate.
We employ cappy as well as feed data back through the pixel, but that's really to feed the Facebook algorithm and strengthen our signal. We do not rely at all on Facebook UI data. We use Rockerbox as our multi-touch attribution model cross-channel that's able to track clicks over a really long period of time, as well as model out impressions. And we really see that as our source of truth. I've done media mix models as well in my past and incrementality testing.
I was just going to say quickly, yeah, I mean, I don't think anyone, any sophisticated people are using in-platform data from Facebook, Instagram as their source of truth. We have seen people using cost per high value visitor as a new metric that they bring in. So, thinking back to when the future value user, and they're looking across channels and campaigns and saying, hey, what was the cost to bring me a high value, someone who's going to convert in the future? What was the cost to bring me a high value visitor as a sort of new optimization function?
It's actually a really good point on thinking about the metrics that are higher funnel, like that you maybe can rely a little bit on with Facebook. And so one that we look at is like impression to session as an example of like, how is our creative doing, right? Like, are we actually driving people to, our website? And so we definitely, to your point, like don't rely fully on like Facebook CPA data, but at least there's some metrics that your team can utilize to understand the performance of the ads themselves.
Awesome. This has been so helpful. I want to wrap up with one final question, because I know this is a hot industry. All of you guys are trying to fill your teams. My closing question, I'm just going to go around the screen and say, you know, are you looking to fill roles on your team, and where can people find them? And Richard, I'll start with you.
Yeah, we are hiring at literally as fast as we can. So from engineering to sales to business development representatives to market development. Yeah, you can find me on LinkedIn. And if you're looking for a role, we probably have one open.
Awesome. Aubrey.
Yeah, again, we're also hiring like crazy. 2 in particular, I'll mention. We are looking for, sophisticated media buyers to leverage all of the cool data and insights that we're surfacing in projects that we're working on. And then also a media analyst to actually be on the central media intelligence team that supports all of our brands on my team as well. So yeah, please message me on LinkedIn and I can get you to the job descriptions.
Awesome. Katie?
Yeah, there were roles on my team. Those have been filled, thankfully. I know we are looking for a director, senior director of brand marketing. So if anyone is interested, feel free to link in me.
Awesome. And Seiya?
Yeah, so this is the time to join, the telehealth space. It's really exploding. And so we're doing everything across the board. I actually have, coincidentally, a paid social role on my team that I'm hiring, but ultimately, like, no matter who you are, type of businesses, if you're interested in something more mature, if you're interested in like launching a new brand, like we have that, a new brand in business, we have that sort of growing within across all of 30 Madison. So it's a really exciting time to join this space. And if you want to, feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn as well. Happy to introduce you to the right folks.
Well, thank you guys, Richard, Aubrey, Katie, and Seiya. Thank you so much for joining. You are all kind of in such a dynamic intersection in the market and doing a lot of interesting things. So it's been a pleasure having you share your insights on this very, very timely topic. So thank you so much for being with us today.
I appreciate it. Thank you for
Yeah,
having us.
thank you guys.
Organizing, Veronika.
Take care.
Bye.
All right.